If I seem a little slow this evening, or slower than normal, it's because I am. This has been a long, hot day, and I've been at it since early this morning. I started with a gun show, and if anybody's interested, I'll tell you all the results of that at the end. But this afternoon, I've been at it on this FN stock, trying to get it finished, and I'm not quite there, but I thought I'd give y'all a little sneak preview. I have recut the checkering on the fore end, and I butchered a couple places, but it's looking pretty good. And I finished one of the panels on the pistol grip. I'm getting close to finishing the other one, and as soon as I do, it's going to be ready to put together. And I think this is going to be the finest short range, intermediate range deer rifle I've ever set up. I see the potential there. All right, so this one's going to be performing duties as a brush gun. Well, I got a question the other day from Jeff that it was one of those questions that just kind of stopped me right in my tracks as soon as I read it. It was a good question. And the question was from Jeff, he said he grew up in the East hunting the big thick woods in the East, and he had always been told he needed a brush gun. And his question was, is there anything to that? Okay, Jeff wasn't asking about brush guns and what they are and so forth. He was asking the question, basically, does he actually need one? That's a good question. Okay. Us hunters, we talk about brush guns quite often. Just about all of us know what they are, know the details. I'm in the process of setting up one right now. But Jeff actually stopped and asked, okay, do I actually need one? And we'll just say I did not ask myself that question before I started chasing this white whale. Kind of wish I had it, but so yeah, that question stopped me right in my tracks considering what I'm doing right now. And I thought about it, because that is a very good question. So let's dive into this. So for the first part of this, do you actually need a brush gun? And the answer to that is no. You don't actually need a brush gun. You could hunt your entire life with something like this Ruger Mark II and 270 with a 22-inch barrel and 4x12 scope. You could hunt your entire life with this and never have a problem. Seriously. At this or any of the other dozens of rifles out there and any of the other standard hunting cartridges and different scope magnifications, this will do everything you ever needed. Okay, but that's for the question of, do you need a brush gun? But I think a better question might be, is it worth having a brush gun? Could having something like this Winchester Model 94 mean the difference between getting a deer or not, having this versus something like this Mark II Ruger? And the answer to that question is yes. Having this could mean the difference between getting a deer or not. And let's talk about why. Okay, let's start with magnification, or the lack thereof. Having extremely low magnification or no magnification up close, it lets you get on the deer quicker. You can get on them and shoot quicker with iron sights or low magnification. Plus, okay, good example of here. Many years ago, I was sitting in a bed of ferns in a swamp with a thicket in front of me, and a big deer came up on me, and I mean a big one. Probably the biggest deer I've ever seen. He went into the thicket in front of me, and the rifle I had a 4.5 by 16 power scope on it. I had it set on 4.5 power, but the deer went into the thicket, and all I could see was bits and pieces of him through the brush. I could see, his head here and tail here, and it's somewhere in between elsewhere. And I put the crosshairs on him. But even at 4.5 power and that stuff, all I could see was brown, and I couldn't figure out exactly what part of the deer I was seeing. I couldn't see Okay, through that hole in the brush right there, is that his shoulder or is that his rump, or what am I looking at? If I'd have had this, I'd have got him. Just bottom line, because I'd have been able to tell, okay, his head's over here, so that's his shoulder, or that's his midsection. With that 4.5 power, I could not tell. And as a result, I didn't pull the trigger. I wasn't going to risk wounding him. And that deer got by me, and I never saw him again, and it still hurts to this day. That was one of those deer that, had I had this, I would have a really big head on my wall right now that even you Midwest guys would look at and say, that's a nice deer. And we don't have many of those around here. Right, so having that low magnification or no magnification in the brush can make a difference. And not only just getting on the deer, but getting on them quicker. Okay, what's the next advantage of a brush gun? The bullets. Okay, we don't talk about that a whole lot, but the two rifles I'm setting up, the FN and the 1903 A3. For the 1903 A3, I'm setting it up for longer ranges, so I've got a Spitzer tip here, actually polymer tip, but pointed bullet. And I want higher velocities. I'm planning on using it longer distances. All right. For that FN that I was just talking about, I've got round nose bullets. And I'm gonna download these, so it's gonna be going lower velocities, plus I got the round nose bullets. Well, there have been many, many, many studies done over the years that have proven a large, heavy, slower moving round nose bullet is less likely to be deflected or destabilized if you hit a twig or brush or something in between you and the target or you and the deer. So you're less likely, with the round nose moving at slower speeds, heavier bullet, you're less likely to hit a twig or something in the bush and wound or completely miss the animal. Okay, less being the key word. It can still happen, and you don't shoot a deer through bushes. Okay, and just from a safety standpoint, I have heard, I don't know how many stories about people that shot into the bushes at a deer and they shot their friend or their family member and killed them. Okay, you don't shoot into bushes. When you shoot a deer, you have to know it's a deer. And if you see a deer, you know it's a deer. Not only that, you need to be able to clearly identify the deer. Is it a buck? Is it a doe? Is it a big one? Is it a little one? Is it something you need to let walk? If you can't tell all that from looking at the deer, you haven't identified what you're shooting at. You have not positively identified your target if you can't tell if it's a buck or if it's a doe or if it's a big one or a little one. So you don't just shoot into bushes, and you have to see exactly what you're shooting at. But there can be a twig or something in between you and the deer that you just can't see, that one little twig sticking up. So we're not just shooting through stuff, even with, heavy round nose bullets and brush guns. But if you were to hit a twig or something, that big, heavy, slow moving round nose bullet's more likely to still hit the animal and, where you want it to. So that is an advantage of brush guns. And I can honestly say I've never had a problem with a bullet deflecting on a twig, and that's been studied enough that it is proven these are less likely to have an issue. And I have hit a few twigs here and there that I did not see. So that does happen, whether or not it deflects, and especially if you start getting into the really light, small, really fast moving bullets, those are much more likely to deflect or, have a flight problem, destabilize. So, that's an advantage of something that could potentially happen. All right, so what's some other issues or advantages to brush guns that could help you? Traditional brush guns generally offer a fast follow-up shot. So be it a lever action where you've got that quick follow-up shot, or a semi-auto, those traditional brush guns. Okay, so having a fast follow-up shot could potentially mean the difference between getting a deer or not. And myself personally, okay, I'm not going to tell y'all this entire story of stupidity of a teenager hunting, because that's what this is, but I will tell y'all part of it. Many, many, many years ago, I was 13, 14 years old. Deer came out 40, 50 yards away. I put the scope on the shoulder, squeezed the trigger. Again, a big buck, a really nice one. Squeezed the trigger. Gun goes off. That deer hit the ground. He jumped up. He ran around in circles, and then he took off through the woods. I was using a semi-automatic. My FM-49 I've talked about before. The problem was I shot him with my last bullet. I was out of ammo. Did I mention there's a lot of stupidity involved in here? Okay. Anyway, so yeah, having another bullet and having a semi-auto at that time would have meant the difference between me getting a really nice deer or not. Okay, finding the deer, so forth. I could have put another bullet in him. So yeah, that is an advantage to your traditional brush guns. And that's about the biggest advantages I can think of, but those advantages are real. Okay, but with that said, and this is something a lot of you already know this, you're never always going to have the perfect rifle, perfect setup, for whatever moment you find yourself in hunting. I mean, that's just bottom line. What I just said about the magnification and being able to go low enough on my power, or not having iron sights on that one really big deer. That happened. It's only happened once in my entire life, and we're talking, I don't know how many deer. So, yeah, how likely is it to happen? It's not very likely. The deer that I could have actually used a second shot to, and I would have probably got the deer. That's the only time in my life that I actually needed a follow-up shot. That's the only time in my life I actually had time for a follow-up shot. Usually, you pull the trigger on the deer and that's it. Either they're gone, they're running, and I mean moving, or they're on the ground. There's no follow-up shots generally. They don't usually do laps and figure eights and stuff in one spot. Donuts. That deer was literally doing donuts. You could see the dirt flying out from under his hooves. But anyway, that's happened once in my life. Okay, so those instances where that dedicated brush gun are going to make the difference, they're so infrequent that is it worth justifying going and getting a brush gun? That's a tough one. And at the same time, okay, you hunting with a dedicated brush gun, that could cost you a deer. Maybe you're sitting there with that dedicated brush gun and you end up in a place where you have a long view and all of a sudden there's a deer, however many yards out, and you can't take a shot because it's too far out because you don't have a scope. All right, so again, we're never ever going to have the perfect setup for every conceivable situation. We're never always going to be prepared. But if you've done your scouting, you know where you're hunting, you're in the thick stuff, yeah, it could be worth it having a brush gun. And I like to think of it as a luxury. And I've said before and talked about specialized rifles versus versatile rifles, and a brush gun like this is a specialized rifle. When you do have a specialized rifle in a special situation, they're nice. You get out of that special situation and they're not quite as nice anymore, but having, a specialized rifle for whatever, it's a luxury. It's not a requirement, it's not needed, you don't have to do it, but if you can, I think it's worth it. And again, that's why I set up 2 rifles now, and that's why with the FN and the 1903 A3 30-06s I'm setting up right now, even though they're both the same cartridge, 30-06. I'm setting them up very differently. I'm setting one up with the round nose bullet, traveling slower at 308 speeds roughly, 22-inch barrel rifle. I'm going to go flow magnification scope, and y'all will see all that next week, since we're almost done finally with that checkering. But anyway, I'm setting up that rifle to be a brush gun, a short to intermediate range rifle. And then the 1903A3, 24-inch barrel, a little longer rifle, get a little more speed out of it. I'm setting it up to be a longer range gun. I'll have higher magnification on the scope on the 1903A3, again, longer range. Either one of them could end up potentially costing me a deer in the wrong situation for that rifle. Again, you're never always going to have the perfect rifle, so that's one of them I wouldn't worry about it too much. And to your question, Jeff, is there anything to that as far as needing a brush gun? Well, if you've ever had a problem, if you ever ran into a problem that you can look back and say, okay, having a brush gun would have got me a deer. Maybe it would be worth it if you got one, but again, there's always going to be things come up. And just to expand on that, last season I was out there with the muzzleloader. I was in the brush. I was in the thick stuff. I was in a little opening where I would have had that perfect 30 or 40, 50-yard shot with the muzzleloader. Had a 3x9 power scope on it, and I'm sitting there on 3 power, which would have been okay for where I was at. I had enough visibility. I saw something just move, and out of the corner of my eye, way off in the distance, in the thick stuff, I just saw something just caught my eye, and I can't even tell you what it was. Probably a tail flickering or an ear. I had to crank the scope up to 9 power, threw it up, and I just caught a doe looking through a hole in the bushes walking off, and I never saw her again. If she had stopped, I could have shot her. All right, so being able to go up to that 9 power versus iron sights, if she had stopped, that could have got me a deer rather than costing me one. And that's what I mean by is, things are never going to work out perfect hunting. Just, you have to figure out how you hunt, what's your style of hunting, where you hunt. You're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. Just like that one I talked about that got away, the big one, or the one I didn't find. And you shoot one and wound it, and you don't find it, and that hurts. All right, those are your learning experiences, and a lot of us have been there. But the ones that get by it, and this is why I didn't pull the trigger on that big one. I had some bad experiences prior to that, and I wasn't going to wound him. I wasn't going to take the chance, and that's part of developing patience and becoming a better hunter. And again, just accepting there's times they're going to get by, and it's okay, and don't worry about having the perfect setup, but make adjustments. If on that brush gun, if you find yourself in those situations more often than not where you're sitting there thinking, the iron sights would be really nice here, yeah, I'd say you should go on and get you a brush gun. But that's just something we all have to figure out for ourselves. So I hope that helped some of y'all out. The gun show this morning, that was a good experience. I went with my buddy Joey, and we were a few towns over, and I'm glad we went. There wasn't a whole lot there. It wasn't a really big show, but there's some guns to look at. That was nice. And they had some prices that I thought were a bit extreme on quite a few of them. But I saw a few rifles there that they had some decent prices on them. I did not see that at the gun show last February. That was a really good sign to see at least some of the prices coming down. And I saw more ammunition for sale than I've seen in a long time. So there's a couple people there that had primers. Now, they were asking a good bit for those primers, but they had them, and if somebody really needed them, they could have got primers. That was a good sign. So it looks like things are getting better. And Let's just hope they keep going in that direction. That was a positive sign. And then we stopped by a gun shop in that area afterwards. That gun shop actually had a lot of powder on hand. That was nice to see. Now, they were asking so much for that powder that I guess they're going to have it on hand for a long time to come. Because I don't see anybody buying any of it because they were charging so much. $75 to $100 a pound. But they had it. So that's a start. That's more than I've seen in a while. And I've seen signs of the powder slowly starting to come back. So things are looking better. That same gun shop also had a ton of ammunition, including pistol ammunition. I mean, defensive rounds, ball ammo, different brass, aluminum cases, brass cases. They had some choices. So that was nice to see, and I'm glad we went this morning. It's worth it, and it's good to see things going in the right direction, and I thought a few of you might enjoy hearing about that. And one last thing, I'd had a few requests since I did the load development videos, and I showed my sheet for recording my information about my loads and so forth. I had a few requests to make that sheet available, and what I did is I uploaded that into the Facebook group, the Tom River Simple Living Facebook group. And it's kind of confusing on the Facebook because there's the Tom River Simple Living page, but there's also the Tom River Simple Living group. All right, so if you want that sheet, you'll have to actually join the group. And I'll try to make it available on the page. I don't know if I can upload a form there, but you can actually get the form in Excel off of the group. So hopefully that helps some of y'all out. And I think I'm fixing to call it a day. God bless, and y'all have a good evening.